In Lesson 5, Holly learns about walkaway alternatives and commitment, the two elements that relate directly to the decision about whether to agree to the proposed deal or pursue a better alternative. Suppose Holly and a buyer have invested time and energy developing several options for a possible agreement. When does Holly know this is an acceptable deal? How does the buyer make the same decision? What is the criterion by which they measure the value of the set of options on the table? The underlying question to ask is how well these options satisfy our interests. Will this be a good deal for us? A good deal compared to what? Answer: a good deal compared to what we can do on our own without the involvement or agreement of the other party. If we walk away from the potential deal, what alternatives do we have for satisfying our interests? We call these our walkaway alternatives, one of which is likely to be best suited to satisfy our interest if we don't finalize a deal based on the options on the table. The buyer might be comparing the options for a potential deal developed with Holly to what he can get from one of Holly's competitors. No doubt he'll have used this alternative possibility as a basis for requesting specific options from Holly. When the buyer compares the two sets of options, he'll need to decide which set better satisfies his company's interests. Similarly, Holly might already have an offer from a competitive chain that she can use as a basis for evaluating whether the deal with chain A satisfies her interests better. They might pay less per case and give an additional week for delivery, but provide no in-store promotion or display. Holly will need to establish priorities among the interests of Holly's Jolly Salsa to make the comparison. If Holly or the buyer walks away from the potential deal, what alternatives do they have for satisfying the same interests that got them to the table in the first place? That is the concept of the walkaway alternative, sometimes called the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Before committing to a potential deal on the table, we need to know how well we can satisfy those same interests by pursuing an alternative course of action that does not involve the agreement of our current negotiating partner. One of these walkaway alternatives is likely to be best suited to satisfy our interests. Holly's best walkaway alternative is the criterion by which she should decide whether to make an agreement with the grocery store buyer based on the options on the table. In other words, Holly needs to choose wisely between the options on the table and her best walkaway alternative. It becomes apparent then that the discussion of potential terms of agreement occurs within the shadow of each side's best walkaway alternative, what they can do without the involvement or agreement of the other party. Thus, Holly needs the most complete understanding possible of both her best walkaway alternative and that of the grocery store buyer, and how well each satisfies their respective interests. We need to know what each can do if the talks fail. The better Holly understands each side's walkaway, the more confident she will be in conducting the negotiation, and the more adept she will be at crafting options for a possible deal. Having a thorough understanding of each party's walkaway alternative is also helpful for anticipating what others might be using as a measure of a potential agreement. Often, the walkaway alternatives can be a source of creativity for value generation and a basis for developing a trustful relationship. If she chooses to do so, Holly can put each side's walkaway alternatives on the table during the interactive aspects of the negotiation. But she should take care to use walkaways to help craft the best possible options for an agreement, rather than as a cudgel with which to threaten or be threatened. The core of the strategic negotiation model has both a preparation mode and an interactive mode, and we sometimes move from interaction back to more preparation for the next interaction. In both the preparation and interaction modes, our focus should be on creating value through the exploration of options that meet the parties' respective interests, while satisfying their mutual understanding of legitimate standards, all while measuring the sufficiency of the potential options against how well the parties can satisfy their interests by walking away. We want to be able to choose wisely between the proposed deal and our best walkaway alternative. The subject of choosing wisely brings us to commitment, the last of the 8 elements of strategic negotiation. In the haggling model of negotiations, parties engage in a process of continually making and revising commitments. In other words, they make offers, counteroffers, counteroffers to the counteroffers, revised counteroffers, and so on. This series of demands and concessions is called positional bargaining. It has numerous drawbacks. In the strategic negotiation model, the commitment comes at the end of the process. To be sure, Holly and her negotiating partners make numerous commitments about the process along the way, such as commitments to meet at a given time and place, or to exchange documents, or to provide samples, and the like. But a good strategic negotiator creates the value first and enters into the commitment at the end of the process. As we said before, it's a choice between the deal or the best walkaway alternative. We assess the quality of negotiated commitments by 3 criteria. First, a good commitment is realistic. That is, it's reasonable to expect that the parties can actually do what they say they'll do. An unrealistic commitment will not hold. Second, the commitment should be sufficient. It should cover all the items necessary to make the deal work. The parties should not discover halfway through the performance phase that they forgot to address an important issue. Third, the commitment needs to be operational. The parties need to know who will do what and by what date or time. Leaving this vague or unaddressed is a way to set the deal up for failure. Now, these 8 elements are a lot to keep in mind while interacting with other parties. We can easily lose sight of the big picture as we focus on the message of the moment. It's like looking at this part of the gadget while ignoring everything else. But doing that leads to less good agreements. So, what's the solution? We've all heard the joke about the young musician who, upon asking how to get to Carnegie Hall, received the reply, "Practice, practice, practice." With negotiation, the mantra might be, prepare, prepare, prepare. But just like only good practice makes perfect, only good preparation makes for great negotiations. So how do we prepare well? By using the 8 elements of strategic negotiation that we've just surveyed. We make sure we think about how we will communicate, for example, by returning telephone calls and emails in a timely manner, listening in order to understand where they are coming from, expressing ourselves as clearly as possible, and using the most appropriate media of communication. We pay attention to the factual context, being alert to different perceptions of the same data. We thoroughly analyze the other side's interest as well as ours, and we develop as many options as we can think of that might satisfy those interests and be acceptable to us. We assess potential options using commonly accepted standards of legitimacy. Is it something we would consider fair if we were in their shoes? We build a relationship of trust by remaining unconditionally constructive and practicing the 7 habits of trustworthy people. And we compare our best walkaway alternative with the proposed deal on the table in order to choose wisely between them. Remember, they are unlikely to agree to our best conceivable outcome if they can satisfy their interests better somewhere else. We've included some preparation tools with this program that will help you go through each of the 8 elements for each party. Explanations and the tools are available in Lesson 8. This concludes our overview of the 8 elements of strategic negotiation. In Lesson 6, we'll examine the special challenges of negotiating with agents who represent organizations or other parties. Thanks for watching.